There is a moment in every great empire when the walls start to crack. Not all at once, not with a thunderous collapse, but slowly, quietly, a piece here, a piece there, until one day, you look up and realize the fortress you once thought was unbreakable is now held together by hope and tape and the prayers of an entire city. That is where the Golden State Warriors are right now. And right in the middle of it all, three names sit at the center of everything. Three players whose futures could determine whether the Warriors ride out this storm as survivors or whether they sink into irrelevance while the rest of the NBA moves on without them. Brandin Podziemski, Jimmy Butler, Moses Moody, three names, three completely different situations. Three decisions that will shape what Golden State looks like not just next season but for the next decade. So sit down, get comfortable, because this story has everything. It has drama, it has heartbreak, it has contract negotiations worth tens of millions of dollars. It has torn ligaments and long nights in rehab rooms. It has rival teams circling like vultures. It has a legendary superstar watching the clock tick down on his career while his teammates fight just to get back on the court. This is the real story of the Golden State Warriors summer. And it is one of the most complicated, most emotional, and most important stories in all of basketball right now. Let us start from the beginning. To understand where these three players are, you have to understand what happened to the Warriors over the past year or two. You have to understand the machine that was supposed to carry this franchise into a new era, and then understand exactly how that machine broke down. The Golden State Warriors, as a dynasty, were something that no one in basketball had ever seen before. 4 championships in 8 years. Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. A system so beautiful, so precise, so ahead of its time that the entire NBA spent years trying to copy it. Chase Center in San Francisco became one of the loudest, most electric buildings in all of professional sports. Dub Nation was not just a fan base, it was a movement, but dynasties do not last forever. That is the cruel, undefeated truth of professional sports. Players age, contracts expire, teams move on, and the Warriors, for all their brilliance, were not immune. Klay Thompson left. Jordan Poole, who was supposed to be part of the next generation, was traded. Kevin Durant had been gone for years, and slowly, quietly, the core that had conquered the NBA began to shrink down to one man. The one man who had always been there, who had always been the center of everything. Stephen Curry, 38 years old. Gray hairs mixed into the temples now. A body that has absorbed years of punishment, years of carrying a franchise on his back, and still one of the most dangerous, most gifted players on the planet. Last season, even while playing only 43 games due to a nagging runner's knee injury, Curry averaged 26.6 points, 3.6 rebounds, and 4.7 assists while shooting 8% from the floor, 38 years old, playing the same fluid, magical brand of basketball that had defined an entire era. But even Stephen Curry cannot carry a franchise alone. Even Stephen Curry needs help. And the 2025-26 season was supposed to be the season when that help finally arrived. It did not work out that way. The Warriors finished 37-45. They missed the playoffs. They were eliminated in the play-in tournament by the Phoenix Suns. And by the time the dust had settled, Golden State was staring at one of the most uncertain off-seasons in franchise history. 2 of their most important pieces were not even on the court. They were in rehab rooms, working quietly, fighting through the kind of injuries that have the power to derail entire careers. And in the middle of all of it, their most promising young player, the guy who many believe will be the face of the next era, is sitting in the middle of a contract negotiation that could go several different directions. Welcome to the summer of the Golden State Warriors. Let us talk about Brandin Podziemski first, because his situation is arguably the most complicated of the three. Even though on the surface it might look like the simplest, when the Warriors drafted Brandin Podziemski with the 19th pick in the 2023 NBA Draft, they thought they had found something special, and very quickly they were proven right. Podziemski is not the kind of player who jumps off the highlight reel. He is not throwing down dunks over people. He is not scoring 30 points in isolation. But when you watch him play, really watch him, you see something that is incredibly hard to find. A player who makes the team around him better. A player who seems to understand the game at a level that most 23-year-olds simply do not. He plays every single possession like it matters. He is physical. He competes. He defends. He moves the ball. He hits shots when you need him to. And during his 3 seasons in Golden State, he has become exactly the kind of glue piece that championship teams need. The 2025-26 season was particularly important for Podziemski. Not because he suddenly became a superstar, but because he showed that he could handle real responsibility when the moment called for it. Here is how the season unfolded. Podziemski started the year in a part-time starting role. The Warriors were trying to figure out their rotation, trying to integrate new pieces around Curry, And for stretches of the season, Pods, as his teammates call him, was coming in and out of the lineup, but then everything changed. Jimmy Butler went down in January, then Steph Curry missed time with his knee, and suddenly, the Warriors needed Brandin Podziemski to step up and carry a load that no one had planned for him to carry. He responded brilliantly. Over his final 24 games of the regular season, a stretch where he was finally given a full-time starting role, Podziemski averaged 17. 8 points per game while shooting 38% from beyond the arc. He was not just surviving in a bigger role, he was thriving. By the end of the season, across all 82 games, Podziemski averaged 13.8 points, 5.1 rebounds, 3.7 assists, and 1.1 steals. He played all 82 games. That matters more than people realize. In a season when Curry and Butler combined to play just 81 games total, a staggering number when you think about it, Podziemski was the one guy the Warriors could always count on to be there. Every game, every night, durable, consistent, present. And now, heading into the final year of his rookie contract, the question that is hanging over the entire franchise is this: what is Brandin Podziemski actually worth? That is where things get genuinely complicated. Podziemski's current contract pays him roughly $6 million for the 2026-27 season. That is the value of his fourth-year team option, which the Warriors already picked up. It is an incredible bargain for what he provides, but it is also the last year of that rookie deal. After this season, Podziemski heads into restricted free agency, which means Golden State could match any offer he receives from another team. But restricted free agency has a way of getting messy, of getting expensive, of creating exactly the kind of tension and drama that teams prefer to avoid. Which is why the Warriors want to sign him to a contract extension now. Before the season starts, before the drama begins, according to reporter Brett Siegel of Clutch Points, Podziemski's next contract could carry an average annual value of somewhere between $22 and $24 million. Think about that for a second. He is currently making around $5.6 million. If both sides agree, he could be looking at roughly 4 to 5 times his current salary. But here is the catch. The Warriors would prefer to pay him somewhere in the $15 to $18 million range. They think that better reflects his current value on the market. Podziemski and his agent, the respected Bill Duffy of WME Basketball, believe he has earned more than that, especially after his performances late last season. The gap between what Golden State wants to pay and what Podziemski wants to receive is real. It is not insurmountable, but it is real. And making things even more interesting is the comparison point that keeps coming up in these discussions: Moses Moody. In October of 2024, the Warriors signed Moses Moody to a 3-year, $39 million extension. That was roughly $13 million per year. It was a reasonable deal for a promising young player, and it set a precedent, a kind of baseline for what Golden State is willing to pay its young guards. Now, Tim Kawakami of the San Francisco Standard, one of the most respected Warriors reporters in the business, has written that he does not know if Podziemski is worth significantly more than what Moody received, but he is also absolutely certain that Podziemski will want more. And he is equally certain that the Warriors will not want to give Podziemski anywhere near the $123 million 4-year deal they gave Jordan Poole back in October of 2022, a deal that became one of the most criticized contract decisions in recent Warriors history. So the negotiations are happening. The two sides are talking, and as of the most recent reporting, just days ago, Warriors GM Mike Dunleavy Jr. has expressed genuine optimism that a deal can get done before training camp begins. "We really value Brandin," Dunleavy said. "He's a player that for all the things he does well, most importantly impacts winning. When he's on the court, we're a better team. So anytime you got a guy like that, you want to be able to keep him around." Strong words from a general manager. Words that suggest the Warriors are serious about getting this done. But here is the thing. Even while these negotiations are happening, even while Dunleavy is saying publicly that he wants Podziemski around for the long haul, there are forces pulling in a very different direction. Because multiple teams around the league have made it clear that they would love to have Brandin Podziemski on their roster, and the Warriors have already had to make some very firm decisions about protecting their young guard from those kinds of advances. The most notable example came at the NBA trade deadline back in February. At that point, the Philadelphia 76ers, one of the most aggressive teams when it comes to pursuing talent, reportedly made a push to acquire Brandin Podziemski. The Warriors shut it down. There was no hesitation, no real deliberation. The Warriors heard what Philadelphia was offering, looked at their situation, and said no. According to the reporting, the 76ers were exploring deals for multiple players around the league, including Podziemski. But Golden State was not interested in any package Philadelphia could put together. And it is not hard to understand why. At $5.6 million this season, Podziemski is one of the most underpaid players in the entire NBA relative to what he actually does on the court. He is also one of the only reliable, durable, consistent pieces the Warriors have heading into a season where they are going to be short-handed from the very first tip. Trading him would leave Golden State dangerously thin, and it would send away the one player who many believe will be the foundation of the franchise after Curry's era eventually comes to an end. Podziemsky himself has spoken about this with striking maturity. He has made it clear publicly, deliberately, that he wants to stay in Golden State for the long haul. He is not pushing for a trade. He is not making noise. He is not creating drama. When they leave this thing, Podziemsky has said, referring to the veteran core of Curry, Green, and Butler, they've got to leave it with somebody. That somebody is him, and he knows it. I want to be here for the long term, he told reporters directly during the playoff stretch this past spring. 23 years old, already thinking about legacy, already understanding the weight of what he is being asked to carry, that kind of mindset is rare, and it is one of the reasons the Warriors value him so much, but the negotiation is still ongoing. The gap is still there. And the deadline, which is essentially the start of the 2026-27 season, is getting closer every day. The path forward for Podziemsky, if the extension does not get done this summer, is still protected. The Warriors hold his rights through restricted free agency. Any team that wants to sign him would have to make an offer, and Golden State would have the chance to match it. So they are not in danger of simply losing him for nothing. But the uncertainty is not good for anyone. Not for Podziemsky, who wants clarity about his future. Not for the Warriors, who need to know what their financial picture looks like going into a critical planning period for the franchise, and not for fans, who simply want to know that their favorite young player is going to be wearing a Warriors jersey for years to come. Watch this space. The Podziemsky extension story is far from over, and it could have major ripple effects on everything else the Warriors are trying to build. Now we need to talk about Jimmy Butler. Because no story about the Golden State Warriors right now can be told without spending serious time on what happened on January 19, 2026, a date that Warriors fans will remember for a long time. A date that changed the entire trajectory of the season, and possibly the trajectory of the franchise. That night, the Warriors were playing the Miami Heat at Chase Center. And it was a game that carried a very particular emotional charge because Jimmy Butler had spent years in Miami. He had nearly won a championship there. He had been beloved there, and he had loved them back. And then, in one of the most surprising trades of the 2025 season, he had been moved to Golden State. The Warriors had acquired Butler midway through the 2024-25 season. And despite the compressed timeline, despite the challenge of integrating a 35-year-old superstar into a new system, the connection between Butler and Curry had started to click. The Warriors had gone on a 12-4 surge with Butler in the lineup. He was averaging over 20 points per game on exceptional efficiency. There was genuine excitement building in San Francisco. Real, legitimate excitement about what this team could become when everyone was healthy and firing together. But Butler himself admitted it was frustrating. He and Curry had never really been able to play together at full health for an extended run. "It just sucks," Butler said, "because we ain't never really been healthy together. Part of winning is being healthy. You ain't seen us healthy at the end in the playoffs when it matters. Let's be healthy, and then all of that can be heard." Words that hit differently now because on January 19, 2026, in the third quarter of a game Golden State was winning by a wide margin, Jimmy Butler went up to contest a play and came down wrong. His right knee buckled underneath him. He grabbed it immediately. The arena went quiet. The kind of quiet that sports arenas get when everyone in the building understands, even before the medical staff reaches the player, that something serious has just happened. His right ACL was torn. Completely torn. His season was over. And so, almost certainly, was a significant portion of his next season. The diagnosis confirmed what everyone feared. Surgery was scheduled, and on February 9, 2026, Butler went under the knife to repair the torn ligament. The procedure was successful. But ACL repairs are not quick fixes. They are long, grinding, painful recoveries. The body has to rebuild itself from scratch. And at 36 years old, Butler turns 37 this offseason. The process is even more demanding. The typical ACL recovery timeline in the NBA is 8 to 12 months, and Butler, given his age and the extent of the injury, was expected to be on the longer end of that range. ESPN's Shams Charania said it plainly on NBA Today just days after the injury. The Warriors are already bracing for the possibility and the potential likelihood that he's going to miss the start of next season. Steve Kerr, Golden State's head coach, was equally direct in the months that followed. Both Butler and Moses Moody, who we will get to very shortly, were expected to miss the start of the 2026-27 season. The best-case scenario, Kerr said, was a mid-season return, around January or February of 2027, roughly 11 to 12 months after Butler's surgery. And that is the target now. That is what the Warriors are working toward. That is the hope that the entire organization is clinging to. The good news, and there is genuine good news here, is that the latest reports paint a positive picture of Butler's progress. As of this summer, people who have been around Butler during his rehab say he has turned a corner. He is roughly 5 months removed from ACL surgery. He still cannot do unrestricted running or sprinting, but the progress is visible, meaningful, real. There's probably an unfair burden being put on him to come back in the January-February range, around 11-12 months after injury, and boost them mid-season, ESPN's Anthony Slater reported. But while acknowledging that the pressure is real, Slater made clear that the people around Butler believe he is genuinely on track. Butler himself has not gone quiet. He has not disappeared into the shadows to nurse his injury in private. He sent a letter directly to Warriors season ticket holders, and it was the kind of message that revealed exactly what kind of man Jimmy Butler is. I can promise you that I will attack my rehab with a singular focus that will enable me to get back to playing the game that I love, in front of the fans that I have grown to love and appreciate. Butler wrote, "I will be back, and I need you back too." That is not the message of a man who is defeated. That is not the message of someone who is secretly thinking about whether he might take his $56.8 million salary for 2026-27 and coast through a recovery without pushing himself. That is Jimmy Butler, the same player who has built his entire identity around outworking everyone around him. The same player who earned the nickname Jimmy Buckets, not because talent fell into his lap, but because he dragged himself from the bottom of the basketball world to the top through sheer relentless will. He went undrafted in high school recruiting. He was lightly regarded coming out of Marquette. He became a 6-time All-Star because he refused to accept limitations that anyone else tried to place on him. The Warriors are counting on that same mentality to carry him through this recovery. Here is what makes Butler's situation particularly loaded from a big-picture perspective. He is in the first year of a 2-year, $111 million contract. This season, he is making $54.1 million. Next season, the 2026-27 seasons, he is scheduled to make $56.8 million. And after that, his deal expires, which means, and this is an enormous piece of context for everything happening in Golden State right now, after the 2026-27 season, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Jimmy Butler are all simultaneously coming off the books. 3 of the 4 most important players on the roster, all entering a new phase of their contractual situations at the same time. That is a franchise crossroads. That is a moment where decisions get made that echo for years. Will Curry retire? Will Butler, who will be 37 or 38 by then, still be playing at a high enough level to warrant another major contract? Will Green, who is already 36 and has his own complicated relationship with his body and his energy, want to keep going? The Warriors do not have the luxury of knowing the answers to those questions right now. What they do know is that this coming season, the 2026-27 season, is about surviving. It is about keeping Steph Curry healthy. It is about managing the development of their young pieces. And it is about waiting for Butler and Moody to come back and remind everyone what this team actually looks like when it is whole. You hope that they both come back healthy, Curry himself said this summer. And we can play at a level that keeps us relevant and competitive and builds a foundation so that we can figure out what it looks like. But that is the situation. We don't live in any alternative universe. We have to deal with reality. That is Steph Curry, 38 years old, still the heartbeat of this franchise, accepting the reality of what is in front of him with a clarity and a grace that you have to respect, even if it is painful to witness. Now let us turn to the third piece of this puzzle. And in some ways, this is the story that hits the hardest emotionally because of the circumstances, because of the timing, and because of what it cost a young player who had just started to truly come into his own. Moses Moody. The Warriors drafted Moses Moody with the 14th pick of the 2021 NBA draft. He came to Golden State as a long, smooth, athletic guard out of Arkansas, a player with natural defensive instincts and a shooting stroke that teams believed could develop into something special. The Warriors at the time were in the middle of trying to figure out how to extend their DT while also developing their young core. Moody was supposed to be one of the pillars of that young core. His first few seasons were a learning process. He was young, he was developing. The Warriors had a veteran roster that did not always give him the minutes or the opportunity to fully express himself. There were growing pains, there were stretches of inconsistency, but in the 2025-26 season, Moses Moody had a breakthrough, a real, undeniable, "This is who I am" kind of breakout. He appeared in 60 games. He made 49 starts. He averaged career-high numbers across nearly every single statistical category. 12.1 points, 3.3 rebounds, 1.6 assists, and 1.0 steals per game. He shot 40.1% from three-point range, also a career best. He became the 14th player in Golden State Warriors franchise history to make at least 150 three-point shots in a single season. Think about how many great players have put on that gold jersey over the decades, and Moody joined a list that not many people make. He was 23 years old, and he was finally genuinely arriving. And then came March 23, 2026. The Warriors were in Dallas playing the Mavericks. Overtime, a close, hard-fought game. And in overtime, Moses Moody went up for what should have been the game-sealing dunk. He launched toward the basket, body fully extended, ready to bring the crowd to its feet, and then he collapsed, just like that. He went down to the floor and grabbed his left knee, and everyone in that building and everyone watching at home understood in that instant that this was not a minor thing. The diagnosis came quickly. A ruptured left patellar tendon. Moody himself later described what it felt like in the moment with a kind of eerie calm that says everything about his character. "It didn't hurt when it happened," he said. "I thought Cooper Flagg ran from the backside. I thought we just bumped knees a little bit or something." He had no idea his knee had just given way. His body had not even fully processed what happened yet. The MRI results came back, and while the injury itself was serious, a ruptured patellar tendon is one of the most grueling injuries a basketball player can suffer. There was a silver lining in the darkness. The tear was clean. It was straight from the bone. There was no damage to the cartilage or the bone underneath. "What they told me was, for a patellar tendon tear, this is a best-case scenario," Moody explained. "The surgery, they said, was pretty easy. I was under in like 90 minutes. It wasn't too bad. I was doing rehab the next day." He had surgery on March 28, 2026 in Los Angeles. The procedure was successful, and Moody, in true form, attacked his recovery from the first day. But here is the reality of a patellar tendon rupture. You do not just bounce back in a few weeks. You do not just miss a month and then come jogging back out onto the floor. UCSF orthopedic surgery professor Dr. Nirav Pandya made the timeline very clear. The typical recovery window is 9 to 12 months. The surgery itself is typically relatively straightforward, Pandya wrote. It's the rehab and healing process that makes this injury a grueling process. Moody was out for the remainder of the 2025-26 season, just like Butler, and his return was projected for mid-season of 2026-27, again in line with Butler, two of the Warriors' most important contributors, both sitting out until roughly January or February of 2027. The team in the most critical stretch of a pivotal season, essentially starting without them. But what you need to understand about Moses Moody is the attitude he has carried into this recovery, because it matters. It reveals something deep about who he is. When he was cleared to speak to reporters shortly after his surgery, he did not come in looking defeated. He came in looking clear-eyed and almost at peace with what had happened. "My knee's been bothering me for a while," he said, "from middle school to high school, and it's all been patellar tendon. So I'm glad to finally get it fixed. And then coming back, I think I'm going to be able to be in a better place than I was when I left because of it." That sentence is remarkable. A man who just suffered one of the most serious injuries in professional basketball, and he is saying he thinks he will come back better, not just back to where he was. Better. He talked about all the things the recovery process would give him time to focus on. The movement patterns he had always wanted to work on. The adjustments to his game that the demands of an 82-game season never allowed him to make. He was reframing the entire injury as an opportunity for growth, and his teammates noticed. Stephen Curry, who joined Moody for a community weekend in Little Rock, Arkansas this past summer, observed his younger teammate up close. Even there, surrounded by young fans who wanted to see him play, Moody refused to do more than his rehabilitation plan allowed. He served as a passer during drills, even when the temptation to jump in and play must have been real. "He's committed to the work," Curry said simply. The latest update on Moody's recovery from just a few weeks ago is genuinely encouraging. He is targeting September of 2026 to resume running and on-court work. That would put him ahead of schedule for a potential mid-season return. The Warriors plan to give an update on his progress when training camp begins. For a young man who has poured his heart and his body into becoming the player Golden State drafted him to be, the injury is painful. But the character he has shown in the aftermath of it, that might be the most important thing Moses Moody has ever shown the Warriors organization. Now let us zoom out. Let us look at all three of these situations together, because when you put them side by side, you see the full picture of what Golden State is dealing with. The Warriors are heading into the 2026-27 season in a very specific kind of controlled chaos. They finished 37-45 last year. They were bounced from the play-in tournament. They missed out on LeBron James this offseason. James, who would have been the kind of transformative addition that could have immediately elevated this franchise, instead chose to sign with the Philadelphia 76ers. Without that addition, The Warriors ended the offseason without making a single significant external move. Not one. They re-signed their existing veterans, Draymond Green, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, DeAnthony Melton, Gary Payton II, and added first-round pick Yaxel Lendeborg at number 11. And that was essentially it. NBC Sports Bay Area's Monty Poole summarized the situation with refreshing bluntness. Dub Nation had been warned that 2026-27 was lining up as a gap year. The off-season focus would be on internal development rather than external additions. Do not expect gifts in July. None came. No gifts in July. None came. That phrase lands with particular weight when you think about everything that Warriors fans have been through. The championships, the parades. The years of watching this organization pull off move after move to stay relevant, to stay competitive, to stay at the top of the league. Now, the gap year is here. And the front office is not even pretending otherwise. What does a gap year actually mean for the Warriors? It means that the first half of the 2026-27 season is going to be hard. Really hard. They will be starting without Butler and Moody. That means the offense runs through Steph Curry, 38 years old, still brilliant, still electric, but now carrying an even heavier load with a knee that has already given him trouble. It means Draymond Green, who will be 36 by the time the season starts, has to continue being a positive force rather than a disruptive one. It means Kristaps Porzingis, the 7'3" Latvian center who has played just 74 games over the past 2 seasons due to his own persistent injury issues, has to finally stay healthy and deliver on the enormous promise his talent suggests. It means a lot of things have to go right for the Warriors just to tread water in the first half of the season. But here is what makes the gap year argument interesting rather than just depressing. The Warriors are not planning to just survive the first half and then give up. The plan, the genuine strategic plan, is to stay competitive enough during those first few months that when Butler and Moody come back around January or February of 2027, Golden State can make a real push. Think about what that team looks like in February 2027. If everything goes right, Steph Curry still one of the most dangerous scorers alive. Jimmy Butler, healthy and motivated and ready to make good on the championship promise his agent so boldly made. Moses Moody, refreshed and potentially better than ever. Draymond Green, the kind of veteran anchor who can make everyone around him more effective. And Podziemsky, either locked into a new extension or playing with something to prove on his expiring deal. That team, at full health, is a playoff team. Maybe more than a playoff team. It is a team that, in a one-game series or a short playoff run, could genuinely compete with almost anyone in the Western Conference. That is the bet. That is what Mike Dunleavy and the Warriors are counting on. It is a calculated risk, and it is not without its critics. The frustration among Warriors fans is real and it is understandable. Steph Curry is 38. He will be 39 by 2027. How many more chances does he have? How many more years of peak basketball remain in those legs and those ankles and that remarkable one-of-a-kind body? Every season that passes without a championship run is a season of Curry's career that you cannot get back. Every gap year is, in a very real sense, a wasted year of the greatest shooter who has ever lived. Some fans look at the situation and see a franchise that missed opportunities. A front office that was too cautious when it needed to be bold. A team that let LeBron walk to Philadelphia while standing pat with a roster that had already proven it was not quite good enough. Others look at the financial picture and understand the constraints. The Warriors are working within real limitations. Their payroll is enormous. The second apron, that threshold in the NBA's collective bargaining agreement beyond which certain roster-building moves become impossible, is a real wall that organizations like Golden State have to navigate carefully. Mike Dunleavy has said as much publicly. The Warriors have roughly $8.3 million of space between themselves and that second apron threshold. That is not a lot of room to maneuver. It limits what they can do in free agency. It limits the trade packages they can assemble. It is one of the reasons the offseason was so quiet. And yes, all three of Curry, Green, and Butler come off the books after next season. Which means if the Warriors want to, they can essentially blow everything up after 2026-27, come into the summer of 2027 with significant financial flexibility, and make a series of aggressive moves to build the next version of this franchise around Podziemsky, Moody, and whoever else they have developed. That is the other side of the gap year argument. It is not just about waiting for Butler and Moody to get healthy. It is about positioning, about giving the franchise the tools to compete in a dramatically different way once the Curry era, inevitably, heartbreakingly, eventually comes to a close. But that calculation involves accepting something painful. It involves acknowledging that the window with Curry might genuinely be closing, that the chance to win another championship with the greatest shooter who ever lived might be running out. "You hope that they both come back healthy," Curry said, "and we can play at a level that keeps us relevant and competitive and builds a foundation so that we can figure out what it looks like." Builds a foundation. That is not championship talk. That is survival talk. That is a superstar who has won 4 titles and 2 MVP awards, who has reshaped how the entire sport is played, quietly acknowledging that right now, the goal is not to win a championship. The goal is to survive with dignity while the younger players develop and the injured ones heal. That is where Stephen Curry is in the summer of 2026. And it is the kind of reality that cuts deep if you love this team. Let us come back to the specific questions that define this offseason and heading into next season. What happens with Brandin Podziemsky? The most optimistic scenario, and the one the Warriors are pushing for, is that the two sides reach an extension agreement before training camp. Somewhere in the $20 to $22 million per year range might be where a compromise lands if one is to be found. It is probably slightly above what the Warriors ideally want to pay and slightly below what Podziemsky ideally wants to earn. But it is a deal that both sides can live with, that gives Golden State security and gives Podziemsky the financial recognition he has been working toward. If the extension does not get done, and Dunleavy, despite his optimism, did acknowledge that there are multiple ways to handle this situation, including waiting until restricted free agency, then Podziemsky plays out his final year on that rookie deal and the two sides revisit the conversation next summer. The risk for the Warriors in that scenario is real. If Podziemsky has a spectacular 2026-27 season, which is entirely possible, given the role he will be asked to play while Butler and Moody are out, his price tag goes up dramatically. Teams around the league will be watching. They already tried to acquire him at the trade deadline this past season. The interest is there, and if Podziemsky gets frustrated with the negotiation, if he feels undervalued or underappreciated, the relationship can get complicated. Golden State has been through that before. They know what happens when young players start to feel like the organization does not have the same faith in them that they have in themselves. The Jordan Poole situation looms over everything. Poole signed a massive extension, struggled to justify it, created friction in the locker room, and was eventually traded. The Warriors are acutely aware that big extensions for young players can go wrong. They are trying to be smart, but being smart can sometimes look a lot like being cheap. And the line between financial discipline and disrespect can get very thin very quickly in an NBA locker room. Podziemsky himself has done everything right. He has been professional. He has been mature. He has publicly expressed his desire to stay. He has let his play speak for itself. He has not created drama or pushed for a trade or said anything that would put the organization in a difficult position. He deserves to be rewarded for that. And the question is whether the Warriors will do so before someone else makes them regret not doing it sooner. What happens with Jimmy Butler's return? This is both the most exciting and the most nerve-wracking piece of the puzzle. If Butler comes back healthy, truly healthy, not just physically present but full-strength Jimmy Butler, then the Warriors in the second half of the 2026-27 season become a genuinely dangerous team. Think about what Golden State looks like in March 2027 with Curry in full flight, Butler running the offense in the fourth quarter, Podziemsky providing the energy and the connector play, Draymond anchoring the defense, and Moody floating around the perimeter knocking down threes. That team is not just a playoff team. That team is a team that could genuinely scare the Timberwolves, the Thunder, the Nuggets, any of the Western Conference powers, but the risk is real too. Butler is 36, almost 37. He is recovering from a torn ACL on a knee that has given him trouble before. He tore the meniscus in that same knee back in 2018-19. He sprained the MCL in it more recently. The right knee has been asking questions for years. The ACL tear was the loudest question of all. ACL recoveries at Butler's age are not guaranteed to return a player to the same level. History has examples of players who came back from ACL surgeries and were never quite the same. A half step slower, a little less explosive, a little more tentative on the cuts that used to be automatic. Nobody is saying that will be Butler's fate. And everything coming out of his camp this summer suggests that he is doing everything right. But the uncertainty is real, and it hangs over the Warriors' plans for the 2026-27 season like a shadow that nobody wants to look at directly. Age of Bernie Lee's words come back here. I've known for over 10 years now that Jimmy is going to win a championship before he is done. My belief in that is unwavering. Bold words. Words that put enormous expectations on the recovery and the return. Jimmy Butler has never been one to shy away from expectations. In fact, he has always seemed to perform better when the stakes are highest, when the pressure is most intense. That is who he is. That is what made him one of the best players of his generation. What happens with Moses Moody? The latest reports suggest his recovery is going well. He is targeting September to get back to running and on-court work. He is in the Bay Area, doing his rehabilitation close to his teammates, close to the organization that drafted him. His mindset has been extraordinary. The idea that this injury, this brutal, grueling, career-threatening injury, might actually leave him a better player on the other side of it is the kind of thing that sounds almost too optimistic when you first hear it. But when you listen to the way Moody talks about it, when you hear the specificity of what he wants to work on during his recovery, you start to believe it might actually be true. He talked about movement patterns, about training his body in ways that the demands of a full NBA season never give him time to do, about coming back not just healed but rebuilt, upgraded. A version of Moses Moody that has had months to work on exactly the parts of his game that he was never satisfied with. If that player comes back healthy and clicking in the second half of next season, the Warriors get a major boost. A 24-year-old shooter who can hit 40% from three, who can defend multiple positions, who plays smart and hard and with an infectious competitive spirit. The combination of Butler and Moody both returning in the second half of the 2026-27 season is what everyone in Golden State is building toward. Everything else, the gap year, the quiet offseason, the Podziemsky negotiations, is noise around that central point. That is the plan. That is the mission. Survive the first half. Stay relevant. Do not completely fall apart. And then when the cavalry arrives, make one last defiant push. Let us also talk briefly about the bigger picture here. Because these three situations do not exist in isolation. They are all part of a single unfolding story about the end of one era and the beginning of another. The Warriors dynasty in the truest sense is over. 4 championships in 8 years. That kind of run does not happen again. The conditions that made it possible, the perfect combination of Curry's shooting, Thompson's spacing, Green's orchestration, Durant's scoring, Iggy's defense, and a coaching staff that understood how to harness all of that talent into something cohesive, those conditions are unrepeatable. What comes next for Golden State is something different, something that has not been fully defined yet. And the decisions being made right now, the Podziemsky extension, the Butler recovery, the Moody comeback, are the opening pages of that next chapter. If you believe in what Podziemsky can become, if you believe that Moses Moody is going to come back better, if you believe Jimmy Butler still has one more great run left in that extraordinary body, then you look at this moment and you see possibility. You see the seeds of something real beginning to grow. If you are more skeptical, if you look at the ages and the injuries and the uncertainty and the quiet offseason and the gap year language, then you see something scarier. You see a franchise that is in genuine transition, that has not yet figured out exactly what it is building toward, that is asking a 38-year-old to carry more weight than any 38-year-old should have to carry. The truth, as always, lives somewhere in between. What we know for certain is this: the Golden State Warriors are at a crossroads. The decisions being made right now, in negotiations, in rehab rooms, in front office conversations, will determine what this franchise looks like for years to come. And at the center of all of it are 3 names: Brandin Podziemski, the 23-year-old who played all 82 games while superstars around him collapsed. The young man who has calmly, quietly positioned himself as the person who will carry this franchise forward. Now sitting at a negotiating table, waiting to find out if the organization values him the way he believes he deserves to be valued, Jimmy Butler. The 6-time All-Star who never got to play a full playoff run with the Warriors because injuries conspired against every attempt. Now in a rehab room somewhere, attacking his recovery with the same ferocity that has defined every single thing he has ever done in his career. $40 million of future salary and a promise to a city that he is coming back, Moses Moody. The young shooter who just had the best season of his career, who finally showed the world what he could be, and then watched it all end in a single devastating moment in Dallas. Now rebuilding, reloading, telling anyone who will listen that he is going to come back better than he left. 3 players. 3 stories. One franchise trying to navigate one of the most challenging moments in its proud and complicated history. The NBA does not wait. It does not pause for anyone. Not even the Golden State Warriors. Not even Stephen Curry. Not even a franchise that has 4 championship banners hanging from the rafters of Chase Center. The clock is ticking. The conversations are happening. The rehab sessions are grinding forward, one painful day at a time. And somewhere in all of that noise and uncertainty and hope and fear, the next version of the Golden State Warriors is slowly, painstakingly being put together. Whether it becomes something great, whether it honors what came before it, whether it gives Steph Curry one more real shot at doing what he does better than anyone alive, none of that is certain yet, but the pieces are there. The talent is there. The will is there. And if the extension gets done, and if the recoveries hold, and if the stars align in the second half of next season, Chase Center is going to get very, very loud again. Do not count the Warriors out. Not yet. Not while Curry is still pulling up from 40 feet and hitting nothing but net. Not while Podziemsky is still showing up to play every single night regardless of what anyone thinks of him. Not while Butler is in a gym right now, somewhere, refusing to accept that this is how his story with Golden State ends. And not while Moses Moody is sitting in a rehab room in the Bay Area, 8 months removed from surgery, already thinking about coming back better. That is the story. That is the Warriors right now. It is messy, and it is uncertain, and it is sometimes hard to watch. But it is never, ever boring. And honestly, that might be the most Golden State Warriors thing of all. Thank you for watching. If you want to stay locked in on every Warriors update as this season unfolds, hit that subscribe button because this ride is just getting started. The gap year is here. But something tells me this franchise has one more surprise left to give us. Stay tuned.